I'm hoping there's someone there to talk to.
Yeah. Right, I'm on. Hiya. Good afternoon or evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's talk. I'll just do a few welcomes. Good evening. Right, from the top. Jill was the first one in today. Jill got the first seat in the house, so she was the first one on. Who was next? Tony was next. Blooming heck, Tony, you're quick today. Graham H, good evening to you all. Who else have we got in here? Jill, Tony, Graham, Richard, good evening, Richard. Sue, good evening, Sue. And Caroline and Dave, good evening, Caroline and Dave. Who else have we got? We've got Caroline O. Good evening. Caroline will be getting a few tips this evening, ready for her talk next week, or it'll come up very quick now. Caroline. Who else have we got? Doreen. Good evening, Doreen. And Jim. Good evening to Jim. Not reading any comments at the moment. I'm just looking down who's in the room. Who else have we got? Jim's in his slippers. Yeah, I must admit I've got my slippers on. So who else have we got here? We've got Diva. Diva's here and listening. We've possibly got Jan from up north as well. Not too sure about Jan. Gromit's in Whitby. Right, fair enough. So if Gromit's in Whitby, then possibly Nick will be as well. So evening, Peter. See, Peter's popped in. Who else have we got? Paul. Paul. A little bit disappointed, Paul. You're well down the list tonight. So it really is sort of midway on the seat for you, mate. Who else have we got? We've got Sue. I've said hello to Sue. Getting down the list. Neil is with us. Good evening, Neil. Who else? Michael Hughes. Good evening, Michael. Hope you're well this evening, young man. And Caroline there. Yeah, Caroline's going to take all of the information from Ray this evening. She's going to steal it from Ray, and she's going to be giving you all her talk next week. So, yeah, right. That's about the hellos to everybody. Good evening to you all. Hope that you're all coping in this cooler weather, this wet weather. It certainly has been a bit of a change over the last 10 days or so from that really good week we had. So never mind. It's supposed to be coming a little bit warmer at the weekend for us all. So hopefully it should be okay. Well, we've got no notices this evening. So don't forget, this is just a little quick reminder. Don't forget that the last pictures for the calendar need to be in by Sunday night. So if you've got any Lincolnshire pictures in a landscape format, 3:2 ratio, which is equivalent to 12:8, that sort of ratio, then get them in ready for Sunday night. That's when it'll close. So that's it. So this evening we have a talk by our Vice Chairman Ray, and Ray's going to entertain us this evening. We shall go through from when Ray starts talking to the time about 8 o'clock when he gets around to the break period. So without further ado, and you won't see Ray, you will just hear him because he's already in advance, and he's got himself his first image up, letting you know what he's talk about. So I shall pass over without further ado to Ray and say good evening, Ray, all yours, and I'll leave it to you from now on.
Right, thank you very much, Graham. So this does seem a bit surreal, doing a talk in my study to no one there. I'm just hoping that someone is there, actually. Of course, I've got no evidence of it because all I'm looking at is my photos.
Well, I can tell you now you've got 21 people, so...
Well, that's good. That's 21 more than I was hoping for. Brilliant. The talk is, as I've already said, is going to be called The Road to Mandalay, a trip round Myanmar or Burma. I will just mention here that I do, and historically, have gone on a lot of holidays to tourist or not tourist destinations before they became touristy. And Myanmar was one of these. Myanmar didn't open its borders till 1992. They've had their first free elections in 1990 and opened their borders in 1992. But the political turmoil and indeed violence around the country didn't lend itself to tourism. Indeed, their most popular year for tourists was 2007. This is prior to me going, and they had only 260,000 tourists in 2007. And I'm sure we all know that Skegness could easily get that sort of number on a single day. So it was actually less popular place to visit than North Korea. North Korea had more tourists. So it wasn't really the time to go and visit then. But when it really became open was after Barack Obama visited in 2012, and my wife and I, we went there in 2013. Anyway, the first 12 photos are not mine. I've taken them off the internet just to give a bit of history about Myanmar before we get to my particular photos. So I'll just run through these and give you a little bit of a background to Myanmar. Of course, the official name for Myanmar is the Republic of the Union of Myanmar. Parts of Burma or Myanmar have been under British rule between 1824 and 1948. This pagoda you're seeing, you'll actually see a bit later in my photos. The British took over all of Burma in 1886. There was, in fact, 3 Burmese wars, not just one. Most people think there was only the one Burmese war, but there was actually 3. And it all started in 1824 when the English perceived that Burma was getting too big for its boots on its border close to India, because India at the time was under British rule. Anyway, when we took it over, of course, it gave us the control of the teak, oil and rubies that Burma had. And of course, those of you that watch the Antiques Roadshow will know that every time they see a ruby, if it's one from Burma, that's when they normally rate about it. Anyway, Japan invaded in 1942. And at the time, it was under basically a military control of who Aung San was a political figure during this time. Burma was eventually recovered by the mainly British forces, and in 1945 it became under British rule again, and we installed a governor. The British sought to put Aung San on trial, but Lord Mountbatten realised this was impossible as he was too popular. Aung San negotiated Burmese independence with the British in 1947, and this was known as the Attlee Agreement. Now, Aung San was a moderate socialist, but he was unpopular with both communists and conservatives. And on the 19th of July 1947, his assassination was engineered by Yousaw, who was a pre-war PM, in Burma. And in 1948, it became an independent republic. You saw a picture a second ago of U Thant. He was actually from Burma, and he was elected Secretary General of the UN, a position he held for 10 years. In 1968, Aung San's youngest daughter, who was known as Aung San Suu Kyi, also worked for the UN during this period for 3 years. Although there were elections during this period, the political situation was fluid, and in 1962 there was a military coup, and the military junta held until 2011. In 1988, I think the previous picture showed a load of protesters, and in fact thousands were killed by the security forces at the time. As I said, in 1990 they held their first free elections, the first time in 30 years, and the National League for Democracy won 80% of the votes. However, the military junta refused to cede power, and Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the leader of the National League for Democracy, was actually imprisoned under house arrest for 15 years out of the next 21 years. Anyway, in 2010, there were elections again, and these were mostly peaceful, and the country did seem ready for change. This just highlights some of the conflicts that were going on during that particular time. And in 2011, on the 30th of March, the military junta was dissolved and Hillary Clinton visited, followed by Barack Obama in 2012. Aung San Suu Kyi has actually fell out of popularity since this time about the Rohingya Muslims, and she's been questioned quite severely about it. So she's not now as popular as she once was. But back in 2012, because it was okay for Barack Obama to visit, we decided that now was the we could go. So the next few photographs are actually taken from my hotel room because we arrived there after a lot of travel. In fact, on the 30th of March, we got the flight to Kuala Lumpur, which was one of the Airbuses that's on 2 levels. And we had a little bit of drama. We were about to take off and the plane did a U-turn, and a woman and a young baby were arrested on the plane. But hey-ho, onto our trip to Burma. As I say, we arrived on the 31st of March. There was 18 in our party, together with a guide. These photos, as I say, were all taken from the hotel room. You can see that pagoda in the background. You will see a closer one in a minute when I put on a 300mm lens. It's completely surrounded by buildings now, as you can see. And in fact, it really is just a glorified roundabout, but probably one of the best roundabouts in the world. These photos aren't of anything particular. They were just what I originally took from my hotel balcony. We couldn't be bothered to go out on this first day because I'm sure you know the long haul flights and that take their toll these days as you're getting older. But it sort of gives a bit of an insight into the capital, which is called Yangon, but it's formally called Rangoon. Actually, Aung San Suu Kyi, when she took power, she said she didn't mind whether it was called Burma or Myanmar. She said she was brought up always knowing it as Burma, but she didn't mind which way it was called. But it seems to now, most places that I see it advertised or spoken about, they do talk about Myanmar. There's a few things for you here, Jim. I don't know whether this would be your type of holiday because it involved a lot of early mornings as you will find out as we go through. Some of these pictures are not particularly good, mainly because this was before I joined Dun Home Camera Club. And so I haven't really done anything to any of these pictures apart from a couple that I have entered in competitions since. Well, the first day of our holiday, the 1st of April, which just happens to be my wedding anniversary. I know what you're all thinking, 1st of April. Well, we do say it's been a joke ever since, but factually, it is my wedding anniversary. Anyway, after breakfast, we started a walk around the city. It's much the same as a lot of cities in the Far East. Lots of people, lots of wires going everywhere. Just the basic hustle of a busy street. There's the pagoda that we're talking about. I will mention a bit more about this later. The reason that we didn't visit this first, although it is one of the holiest sites in Myanmar, is it is too hot. I cannot explain to you how hot this place was. On the first day, it was only about 30, 32 degrees, but it did go up during our course of our time in Burma, up to nearly 40 degrees, and it was extremely humid weather.
Just to interrupt you there, Ray, a comment that's just come up on the chat from Jim. It's just put, seems people are hooked on these early mornings.
Well, I thought I'd mention it because we have a lot of early starts. Anyway, we'll carry on. These main photos are just to get a sort of a scene setting around the capital of Rangoon, or Yangon. There are a lot of colonial buildings around there. And in fact, while we were out for our walk, we actually had lunch at an old colonial hotel where there was the signs of no women allowed, etc. Of course, they use all the bamboo as we know in the Far East, and health and safety seems to go out of the window. But the hotel was nice for lunch. I didn't actually take any pictures of that, and of course I didn't know that I'd be giving a talk some years later. This is a former government building, which is going a bit to rack and ruin, as is the former government telegraph office, which was next. Of course, we don't need telegraphs now. We all do it on our iPhones. Anyway, we sort of still progress with obviously the ultimate aim of going to the Shiwagon Pagoda a bit later. On the way, we visited this lake. Now, this is a replica. It is not the original. It's a replica of a royal barge, because Burma historically has always been a kingdom, and so they had the royal barge. And one thing you will notice on all these photos is there's always a lot of gold everywhere. This one, of course, features the pagoda in the background. That's actually quite a nice photo, even if I say so myself. But I also like silhouettes, and I remember back in my very early days with Dun Home Camera Club, I entered this one as a silhouette for a competition. Anyway, it was the temperature, I think, at this stage had just dropped back down to something like 34 degrees. But anyway, finally, we made our way to the pagoda. And one of the reasons why you can't go to these too early is every religious site, you mustn't wear anything on your feet. So walking on some of this ground was extremely hot. And I'm talking burning the soles of your feet hot. So we were all only too grateful to go later on in the day.
Just a quick one there, Ray, for you. Doreen's just said, did you have to get up early mornings to avoid the later on heat during the day?
No, the reason is the company that I use is a company called Exodus, and they are excellent for this type of holiday because they will always take you off the beaten track, and they will always take you to the places you want to go when they're not busy. But one of the reasons is we caught 3 internal flights, and the internal flights quite often started early. And what happened is the plane does a circular around Burma. And so the first day you get up very early, and the next day that you catch the flight, you don't get up so early because it's now later on on its tour. But yes, I've used them for a lot of trips, including China and things like that, and they're excellent. But they do make you get up early if they think it's for your benefit.
Good.
Anyway, sorry.
I said good, thank you.
Anyway, how the pagoda started was that 2 brothers visited the Buddha in India 2,500 years ago, and they offered him a gift of honey cakes. In return, the Buddha personally removed 8 hairs from his head and gave them to the 2 brothers for enshrinement in their native town, which was later to become the city of Rangoon. On their return, the 2 brothers presented the Buddha's hairs to the king, who erected a pagoda and enshrined the 8 hairs together with other form of relics of previous Buddhas. Also, within the pagoda there are 5,500 diamonds as well. I don't know why they were enshrined, but they were. The original height of the pagoda was 66 feet, and from the 14th century onwards, successive monarchs in Myanmar rebuilt or regilded it until it reached its present height of 326 feet. It is actually quite impressive, but it's also the main feature of this area. But as you can see, there's also dozens of smaller pagodas all the way round. But as I say, the one thing you do have to be mindful of is it's a very religious area. This is indeed a nun. You see the nuns are always in pink. You can't always tell they're female, and I mean this nicely because they all have their shaved heads, but the monks are in a brown robe. Of course, it's mainly a Buddhist country, and indeed there are some Muslims, which of course has led to the present troubles with Aung San Suu Kyi. But the monks are everywhere, and I've got quite a few pictures of the monks, and some of it's quite interesting a bit later on. But you see, all the people there are there for primarily for worship. At this time, we were indeed the only tourists around this area, so our little group. I don't know the significance of these sort of mini umbrellas, I suppose they are, but there was a lot of these, and they seem to be presenting those at the bases of the statues of the Buddha all around the place. But as I say, the actual building was started 2,500 years ago. Of course, as the day goes on, you can see the light changing, and it changes on the gold, and it makes quite a difference. You'll see a couple of photos shortly where the gold goes to a reddy colour. But if you notice some of the local people that you will see, some have got this yellow on their cheeks, and that is a form of suntan lotion.
Just a quick one again, Ray. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
Graham H. has just put, so you had no issues with the photography then, Ray?
No. What I found in a lot of places like this, they really like you taking photos. Something I found bizarre when I went to India for the first time, they had funeral pyres, and bodies were being put on the funeral pyres, and I said to our guide then, I said, "What do you think about taking pictures of the funeral pyres?" They said, "Oh no, they would want you to do it." They said they would like a record of this, which seems a bit bizarre to us.
Yeah.
And again, I once, where was I? Oh, I was in India, and I took some pictures of a wedding going by, and the people rushed over, and they actually invited me to the wedding. And I said, well, I can't get you the photos. And they said, oh, we don't care, as long as there's a record somewhere in the world of our wedding being photographed. Seems very, very bizarre. Unfortunately, I couldn't go to the wedding. I would have loved to have gone, but we were going somewhere else. Anyway, we digress.
Yes.
Back to Myanmar. The 2nd of April. Now, when I say we got up early, 3:45 a.m. Bear in mind, this is only our 2nd day. We had a wake-up call to catch a 4:30 flight to Bagan. Bagan is an area similar to Cambodia's Angkor Wat, so you'll see it a bit later. But we caught the early flight, and that was our hotel in Bagan, which is quite nice. The company always gives us reasonable hotels, but they're always clean. And we decided to leave the hotel early this first day and just go and walk round the town. This was as a group. There was quite a few things to see. And interestingly, in Bagan was that Bagan's name is derived from several other names, which mean the crushing of enemies. So, it obviously harks back to a time where the kings ruled with an iron rod. There's been 55 kings ruling Bagan in this area. We did visit a couple of these temples or shrines in this early part, but then as we were walking through the town centre, we came across a parade. And there's now quite a few pictures of this parade that we saw. Now, the parade was for the initiation of a novice monk and a novice nun into the monkhood or the nunnery, if that's the correct phrase. They're 5 years old when they get taken. Now, it seems as a great honour to get accepted to be either a monk or a nun. And my wife told me when I was going through this talk that I'm going to give you, she reminded me that they might not necessarily sign up for life at 5 years old, but what it does do is give them a good education, which of course, as most of us realise, that some of these countries, the education is not that great. So getting accepted to be a monk or a nun is a great honour, and indeed that's why they make a big fuss about it. I will mention, this is a sound system. The music was so loud. Anyway, they had 3 of these sound systems on this one parade. It was about 300, I suppose, people, somewhere in that range. They do make a big deal out of it, all getting dressed up in their finery. You will see pictures of the novice, monk and nun coming up shortly, but what I will mention here, because it will become pertinent later on, when we went to Burma, we were told there's only 2 cash machines in the country and they don't take credit cards. So, and of course, there's no McDonald's and no Burger King at this time. But so most people tried to take cash, and I prefer to use cash machines if I can. So I thought, well, I can go to the 2 cash machines that they are. One was in Rangoon and one was in Mandalay. But we did actually find another cash machine that the guy didn't know existed. So that's one of the troubles about going to countries when they've first been opened up to tourists. The infrastructure's not there to cope with us. But as I say, this will become pertinent when I was trying to buy things a little bit later on. As you can see, it's a reasonable sized parade. I took a picture of a few of these people. Obviously, some of them are quite sharp. You can see the residue of the suntan lotion on his face. This is used to generate another one of these sound systems that were going by. And they all think the 3 of them will all keep competing against each other. It was just, bearing in mind, I'm deaf. I know you know that I'm deaf and wear hearing aids. It was really loud. here's the DJ behind one of them doing his thing as well. Really quite amazing the volume that they were pumping out here. I think it's after this that we get the picture of the young trainee monk as he's going to be. No, it's not yet. It must be after this one. I'm winging it, Caroline. I told you I was winging it. This is the young trainee monk. Doesn't seem to be that enthusiastic. It is a boy. He is wearing makeup, and he appears to be asleep here. So he doesn't seem to be quite so excited about it. I think this lad was a bit older than 5. The girl, which will show in a minute, is probably about 4 or 5 years old at the oldest, and that's her there. So she is only very young. I mean, she could even be younger than that, but she was accepted. And I'm assuming it's Dad leading her along on the horse there. And there is another picture of a different girl that's also been accepted. But first we have to have the sound system again. Incredible noise. They didn't turn it down. I can't even remember what the music was now, but trust me when I say it was loud. If I go quiet, I am still here, honestly. There's a few more of the parade. It must take them ages to set up and do, but they have them quite regularly. Here's the second girl that's also been accepted. They seem to wear the green when they're going through this sort of ceremony, but they even dress the animals up, as you can see. Wherever there's music, there's always someone dancing, and this girl was dancing on the back of a lorry that went through on the parade. And of course, you're always going to get the fruit sellers and the flower sellers all walking alongside, because they will buy the flowers off these to use within the parade. So it's obviously the in thing to do. Then after this, we walk through the market. If you notice those bags there, I will be talking about those bags a little bit later, because again, they're quite interesting. Recycling taken to a new level. Yeah, but I'll tell you a bit about those shortly. Anyway, we had a walk around the town, which is nowhere near the size of Rangoon. Fairly quiet. There's always a lot of motorbikes in Asia, but there didn't seem to be that many here. But obviously different forms of transport. Some health and safety and common use regulations on the vehicles seem to go by the by. And that looks particularly dangerous should you get entangled up in that one. We went for lunch, and this was just looking out to the river. Set up the tables obviously for some form of lunch later on, but this is coming up is one of the few photos of our party. The age range tends to go from all the way from mid-20s right the way up to sort of 70-year-old, so it's quite a good mix, but it's people that like going a little bit beyond the tourist trails. Anyway, in Bagan we found another golden pagoda. This is a different one to the last one, and again we got here late because again you must walk round barefooted around this area, and more or less did burn my feet several times, but as you can see, once the sun goes down it obviously gets a bit cooler. But I do like the way the gold changes colour when the sun goes down. Let these few photos run out. Again, this was quite a big pagoda. It was certainly not quite as big as the one we saw in Bagan. But here's some street sellers, and you can see the young lady on the right there, where she's got this suntan lotion on her cheeks and forehead. and you can normally tell that they are the poorer people that wear this type of stuff. The young baby's got it on his face there. Interestingly, I think that they seem to be fairly happy people that we saw, but who knows what goes on behind the scenes sometimes. But as the sun goes down again, I managed to get a few fairly good shots, nothing too spectacular, but it shows the sign of the end of another day. Anyway, this then takes us to the 3rd of April. I'll just stop it there. We did get up early and we went to the area that's known as Bagan proper. That was mainly the Bagan town. And we did get up early. I don't have a note of the time, but my wife tends to write journals on these. And if she says we got up early, invariably it's before 7 o'clock. So it would have been about that time. Now,
just a quick one there, Ray. Doreen's just asked, are the pagodas built of stone and then gilded?
Yes, that seems to be the way that most of them are done, yes. And of course, they're nearly all, I've stopped it on this photo, they're nearly all used as places of worship. So you've always got to be mindful of that. And again, as you can see, people with bare feet as well.
Thanks.
But the area is basically 25 square miles. Is that one? Oh, it is going. This is a Kayan woman. Now, I seem to recall from my history lessons that they add these rings as they get older. So they start off with a few and add more and more. And I do recall reading many years ago that if you were actually to remove those rings, it could kill them because they have no neck muscles at all. Everything's withered away, and it's only the rings that keep their head in that position, which seems a little bit bizarre. Anyway, Bagan's an area of 25 square miles with over 4,440 pagoda-type buildings, but and ancient monuments, but only 2,500 are now recognised as such. The area is quite vast, and what you do is you travel between them and go up onto various ones and get good sites. I've seen some good photos of this area on Instagram or whatever it is, but a lot of them seem to have been taken from a hot air balloon that's low down. And unfortunately, when we went there, because it was probably only the second year that tourists had really been able to go, was that they didn't have balloon flights when I was there. Otherwise, I would have gone up in one. But the area itself is really quite amazing. And on some of them, you can see that there's nothing but ancient monuments and buildings as far as you can see. As you see, this one was constructed in 1218. So it is really quite an amazing and extensive area. Inside them, there's a lot of drawings which they do try and restore and make good, but it's just too vast a project to take on for what is a very poor country. Lost my place. Where am I? There I am. Okay. The tour around nearly everywhere that you see and that I've photographed are all encompassing within the particular sites, and you mustn't wear your shoes and socks. So that's one of the reasons why you saw that green carpet in the last one, because stone can get so hot that at least they give you carpet in some places that you can walk on. But I can't explain how hot the tiles were. We actually learnt our lesson fairly quickly, and we all used to nick towels out of the hotels that we were in to take them with us, so that if we had to stand in one place for any length of time, in the sunnier areas, then we could at least stand on a towel, which was allowed. You weren't allowed to wear your socks.
Right, just another
yeah.
one that's come in. Alan's just said, did you see any evidence of World War II whilst you was there?
Well, very bizarrely, one of our group actually took a photo of his I think it was his uncle, or it might have been his grandfather, that fought in Burma, and he took it to because he wanted to take his uncle back. Seems a bit strange to me, but that's what he chose to do. But the short answer to your question is no, we didn't see anything that really was associated with the war. I don't remember seeing any shelled out buildings or anything like that. So the short answer is no.
No. Yep, thank you.
But that's plain, yeah. So as you can see, the buildings just go on and on and on. But of course, today was a very hazy day, still very hot. So you can't quite get the extensive views that you might well get at another time. But as you can see, some of them are in a really bad state of repair, and some are not so good. So they do work on it. And I think in here I've got a picture of a guy that's trying to restore some of the murals inside, but it seems to be a never-ending task. And here indeed he is. And he's on his own, just trying to touch up some of those inside. And it seems a very thankless task, and certainly one that won't be completed very soon. But it is quite an amazing area. There were some new buildings, and indeed that one you can see in the background there looks fairly new, and I think I've got a picture of its external wall. Here's some of our party inside, as you can see, and anything on their feet, which isn't too bad inside. And again, this looks, again, a lot newer, but it's all part of the same complex. I do hoping you're not too critical of my photos out there. I've got some good ones amongst this lot, but as I say, this was long before I joined Durham Camera Club. So I've learned a lot since then, and hopefully I'll keep on learning.
You're never too old to learn, Ray.
That's right. As you can see there, you've got a lot of mist haze, and you can't see very far in the distance. That's purely because of the heat. But again, these are quite popular places of worship. And again, you see the lady there in the front holding the child has got the suntan lotion on her face. You're always going to get people selling stuff. There's locals actually buy this stuff more than the tourists that we saw. I knew I should have got myself a glass of water before I came in here and sat down. It's getting a little bit dry, but I'm sure I'll cope. When we were at this complex within Bagan, we were taken up the last we were going to visit in order to try and get the sunset, but we didn't get a very good one because, as you saw with the heat haze, it just didn't lend itself to a good sunset photo. But I think I got a semblance of one, but it wasn't as good. Again, when the sun starts to go down like this, the colours change completely, and it's really quite an amazing place. It just goes on and on and on as far as you can see. This is where we went up to try and catch the sunset, but no one told the sun and no one told the clouds. That's actually my wife's back view. I'm sure she wouldn't appreciate me telling you that, but that was actually my wife's view. the the kings that ruled round this area did so for quite a few thousand years, and it really only started when the British stopped rather when the British took over. There's obviously a girl trying to get the sunset as well, and I knew I wouldn't get a sunset, so I took one of the back of her head trying to take one of the sunset. Anyway, this led us on to the next day, obviously the 4th of April. We spent a lot of time this day again looking around the same area at pagodas and stupas, but much the same as I've already showed you, so you won't see too many there. But what indeed we did see was yet another parade for the novice monks. So this is the initial part of the day where we went back to the same area and did very much the same thing. But then we did come across this other parade. Unfortunately, on this one, the two recipients of the look a lot happier. This is indeed a boy, much like the first boy you saw in the other one, but at least he looks a lot happier here. And the girl is quite a bit older. And again, as I say, they all seem to wear the green when they're on this parade, but you're always going to get the sound system again. This was quite a... Sorry?
No, nothing, no.
Oh, sorry, I thought someone was saying something. Of course, the monks also travel around here to visit these places of worship. And this was a coachload of monks, of course, who some of them had to sit on top. And I know we've all seen photos out in the Far East of people are travelling on the top. And of course, there's always the older form of transport as well. Whilst we were here, you can see the guy in the bottom left there taking a photo. He's actually taking a photo of us. We definitely were the tourist attraction. He took quite a few pictures of us while we were trying to take pictures of them, which seems a little bit bizarre. This is the world's largest reclined Buddha. It's actually over 300 feet long, so it had its challenges. I could have done with a frog eye lens, I think, but it is the world's largest reclining Buddha. So I did my best within the capabilities of my capabilities and the capabilities of the lens that I had. But it wasn't actually only the Buddha that was reclining. The attendant that was meant to be looking after it also had his recline. But, I thought that was quite a nice shot and I grabbed that quickly before he realised. But after this, we then went to a lacquer factory. Now, this was really, again, everything's made by hand, as you can see. And the art of lacquerware dates back to the 11th century. It starts with a wickerwork of woven, finely cut strips of bamboo, horsehair, wood, essential material, and a mixture of lacquer, resin and clay together with sawdust and ash. And they're carefully built up and then engraved, as you can see here, all by hand. An amazing amount of work. I've taken this photo here. This is actually of a lacquer box that I bought from that factory. It's about, I would guess, 9 inches by 6 inches. The amount of work on it is fantastic. That cost me less than £20. I can't remember how much, but I remember it was less than £20. And if you take into account the amount of engraving that someone's done on that box, is quite incredible. We would actually have bought more, but as I said to you about the money problems, I didn't have enough money in cash to buy any more. So I do have that one memento. That's taken on my lounge carpet. So anyway, that then leads us to the next day, I believe. Yes, the 5th of April. Today, I'll just stop that there for a second. Today, up at 5:30 a.m. because we had a 7:30 flight to Mandalay I know I've called this the road to Mandalay, but we actually flew there. The roads are diabolical. We were told if we tried to do the journey by car, it would take several days. And when they first allowed tourists weren't allowed to bring cars across the borders. So if you ever came into Myanmar from another country, you couldn't take your car or vehicle in. So I think it's a way of tracking where the tourists have gone. And of course, if you fly everywhere, then they have a little bit more control over you. Whether it's still the same now, I don't know. But as you know, in Mandalay, of course, there's bamboo everywhere. And this is a bamboo chair that the lady has made or got made for her. So she was sitting there with her child. And of course, all the children have to do their fair share of work as well. There's the normal bustle of streets. And this is actually our party. And that's our guide in the middle. He was just telling us, I think this was different types of rice. I can't really remember now. But we were going around the market and he was just showing us what each one does. He was a nice young lad, and his English was immaculate. I can't remember where he said he learnt his English. There wasn't actually a lot of fruit and veg at this market, but what there was on display was really quite good. I will tell you a story about eating in some of these far eastern countries. My wife's vegetarian, and we went to Vietnam when Vietnam had only just opened, and we went with a well-known company, and I can't remember who it was now, but there was only two of us on the tour. So we had a guide, we had our driver, and there was just us. Anyway, part of the deal was that we went into restaurants. So we went into a restaurant, and the guide went over and ordered us our meal, and he was explaining that my wife was vegetarian, and I could tell the waiter was very bemused by this, and he couldn't understand it. So when our guide came back, I said, "Can you explain what that was about?" And he says, "Well," he said, I'll just stop this one there just for a second. He said, you're Westerners and they perceive you to be rich. And if you're rich, you eat meat. And so they couldn't understand that my wife didn't eat meat. So I said, how can we cope with this and how can we stop it being a problem? He said, well, Buddhists don't eat meat. So then every restaurant we then went into, we just said, my wife eats Buddhist food, and they understood that. They didn't understand the fact that she would, by choice, not eat meat. Now, this was tyres. Old tyres had been constructed into everything from buckets to sandals to utensils. It was quite amazing. And I mentioned earlier about the wicker baskets that you saw. And these are actually made from the plastic straps that go around cardboard boxes that you have televisions in. You know, when you cut the plastic strap, they were all made out of that. And I would love to have bought one of those because they're really quite strong. And those bags only cost about £1, I think. But we just couldn't manage to bring one back with us. Again, I'll stop this here. This is actually gold leaf. And I took it through a Perspex screen, and the reason the Perspex screen there is A, for security, but B, to stop all the gold leaf blowing away. Now, the reason it's there is that, and I'll play, this statue, which dates from 1901, I believe, when it eventually comes, yes, from 1901, is made of gold. And what they then decided to do is that they would add to it over the years. And they keep putting on more gold leaf onto this statue. They now reckon it weighs at least 5 times more than it did originally. It's just a way of them showing their respect towards Buddha. I took a picture of this old chap, and I did give him I don't know, the equivalent of a quid or so for letting me, and he was quite happy to let me take his photo. On the way back, we went to a wooden Buddhist monastery, which wasn't covered in gold like this one, but you'll see it in a minute, which was all carved wood, which was really, again, quite impressive. What we intended to do after we finished here was to go up to Mandalay Hill again to watch the sunset. But again, sod's law, not a great day for sunsets. So, but you'll see the pictures later where we go up to Mandalay Hill. We also were due to have dinner up there, and this dinner was going to cost us £3 a head for all you could eat, and it was in a very nice restaurant. So we had that, but my wife did actually point out to me that on the menu was pig's colon. Now, I don't know that pig's colon seems that appetising. But we saw this little monk on the way round as well, and he actually asked me to take his photo. So I took a couple of photos from him. And of course, the good thing about digital these days is at least we can show him the back of the camera so he can see his own image. Anyway, at the top of the hill, we went to see the sunset. And again, there's everything seems to be gold in one form or another. None of this is solid gold. It's normally only painted or occasionally gilded, but they do like their colour gold. But this is on the top of Mandalay Hill looking out and about. But as you can see, it's quite a hazy night and didn't lend itself to the photos. And again, you still get the monks as tourists doing what we were doing as well, having a look at the view to try and see the sunset. But again, you've got to remember that all these are religious places, so again, we had to be barefoot walking around here. I have to say that the next day is probably my favourite day of my trip in Myanmar. But we finish off this day with the sun going down. As you can see, the gold suddenly takes a different colour. And it looks nice. Why I took this one, I have no idea, but because as a judge would say, there's nowhere to rest your eyes. But I did see all these shoes for sale and I just happened to take the picture. But the view from up there would have been quite spectacular if it had been a clearer day, but it wasn't that good a day, and the haze. And this was my one shot of trying to get the sun before it disappeared behind the haze. Right, this takes us to the 6th of April. This one, Jim, we got up at 4:45. Now, there was a good reason. It was to go to what's known as Ubain Bridge, which is the world's longest teak bridge. It was half an hour away on bus from our hotel. And we were told, go and see it at sunrise. And these are some of the images I took on by the bridge. The bridge actually goes from the bank I'm on to the far bank that you can see over there. The water was really quite still, and these are some of the sunken boats that I took a picture of. I did enter, I think it's the next one, into a competition. Judge didn't like it, but hey ho, we take pictures for ourselves, and certainly it was one that I didn't know anything about competition before I did it. But the bridge itself is really quite impressive, and it is well used by the locals to get across the river. Fortunately, at certain times the river's quite low, so you can stand below and get the photos up onto the bridge like I've done here. I quite like some of the silhouettery effects that I've got. It is a well-used bridge, and I'm not sure exactly where the locals go from to, but certainly even this time of the morning, which by now would have been about 7:30, something like that, I can't remember, was very, very busy. This one, you've got the dog sitting up the top, and I quite like that one. But the one that I entered into competition, and in fact I put it in my favourite photos last week was this one. I wouldn't have put it in my favourite photos, but I entered that before I knew I was going to do a talk on Burma. This one's quite interesting. You've got the half modern take of the young youth with the monks behind him. But I could have stayed at this bridge all day. It was fabulous. In fact, I got told off by our guide because I was the last one to get back to the coach, because I have no idea how many photos I took here in total, but I did take a lot, of which you're going to see some, but obviously not all. The views from the bridge as well, all of these of people going about their daily business. People cycling over the bridge going on their way to work, I'm assuming, or on their way to shops. It's really quite impressive.
You've got quite a few comments about your silhouettes on the bridge, Ray. Everybody's liking those, especially the bike one, of course.
Yeah, I've got this thing about silhouettes, always have done, and I've taken a few. And again, this is quite nice, I think, because the way the river sort of melts into the sky behind it, it's quite interesting. But I've got another shot coming next where I took it with a different lens, and you can see the sort of context of it. But most people were perfectly in agreement. A lot used to wave when we took their photos, and sometimes I ask, sometimes I don't ask. I prefer sometimes the photos where it catches them off guard and you just take a shot. The Ubane Bridge was quite impressive. This is a fishing station, and on the next photo that you will see, it's actually not that deep there. It looks deep, but then when you look to the right side, that bird is wading. So it's sometimes, and I'm sure one of our bird experts will tell us what type of bird that is. But this one here I quite like as well. The old boy walking and the girl on the bike walking in front of him. They use boats to transport everything. I think there was some sort of large hose that was used, but I'm not sure. And again, you're always getting about the daily business. That item of the skirt type thing that man was wearing, I'll mention that a bit later as well, when we get to the relevant photographs. But I could have stayed here all day. The way the light changed from early morning to later on. And as I say, I did actually get told off for getting back late because we hadn't had our breakfast. So everyone was keen to get back to the hotel to have their breakfast, because the main bulk of the day was going to be taken up on a boat ride. So this is us going now to the boats after having had our breakfast at the hotel. So, we did go on a tourist boat, obviously, but of course it was always moored amongst all these other boats, which are family homes used for work. And you see the gangplanks there. We had to walk across those to get to our boat. Needless to say, I was taking photos of that gangplank as all of our party went over it, just hoping someone might accidentally slip in, but they didn't. We stopped off while we were on the boat as well, and that crack was developed during an earthquake, and I believe that was in the late 18th century that earthquake caused that massive crack in that building. But of course the boats are used by people for their work, for watching television, as you can see there, and all of that. So we had to make the way across quite a few of these in order to get to the one on the outside, which was the one that we ultimately were going to take up the river. There's a couple of lads there, they were only too pleased to have their photo taken. They obviously knew what a camera was. This was us out on the boat. I put the mallet there because I thought it balanced the photo out a bit better. But I didn't level the horizon, as you can see. Anyway, we stopped on the way several times, and this was the world's second largest bell. It actually weighed 90 tons. I think the largest was in Russia somewhere. Again, another silhouette photo. I quite like these, but they're not for everyone, I realise. This was another place we stopped at, and the thing that sticks in my mind here is this was probably the hottest day. I think it went up to pushing 40 degrees there, and to walk round barefoot on that stuff was really quite hard work. Here's a little novice nun. She could only surely be about 4 or 5 years old. And here's a couple of older nuns. And as you can see, they all have to shave their heads. We actually, at the end of this day, I think it was the end of this day, we went to a nunnery. This young chap was eating his lunch as we sat down to have ours, and he sort of asked me to take his photo, so I took a picture of him and his sister as they were eating their lunch. As you can see, she's got the suntan lotion on her cheeks. This form of transport was also very, very common wherever we went, the oxen. But we came back, we eventually went back to this place again to have a look round it, and whilst we were there, we saw some monks. This monk was taking photos, as you can see. I took photos of him, but he was taking photos of us. He said, he gestured, can I take your photo? So some of our group stood around and let him take a photo of us, which again seems a bit bizarre. Just a few colourful dresses that was for sale here. It's very colourful, and this chap, I just asked him, can I take his photo? And he just stood there, so I took it. And a very interesting face. And of course the kids always are only too happy to have their pictures taken. No matter where you are in the world, they never seem to mind. But the boat ride carried on, and we went to various places. And on the way back, we saw all these clothes that had obviously been washed in the river, and they just laid them all out like this to dry in the sun. And I would imagine in the heat of the sun, they dried very, very quickly. But as you can see, they're in the bottom there, they're still washing more. I'm assuming it's more than one family, but who knows? I will mention about souvenirs here. We do like taking souvenirs, and I remember asking a guide once, what did he think about souvenirs? And his words were, well, if you think you're getting a good price and he's happy to sell it to you, he said, well, then buy it. He said, but when you come back to the coach, don't ever, ever tell anyone how much you paid, because even if you thought you got a bargain, someone would have got it cheaper, which I think is very, very true. Mm-hmm. It's always worth keeping it quiet how much you actually paid for your individual souvenir. I do remember bartering with a girl once on it was Lake Titicaca in Peru, and she asked for £1 for these hand-drawn pictures, and they were easily worth £1. But I like haggling, so I haggled with her. And I'll stop this for a second. We're nearly at the end of this day and our break. I haggled with her, and I got her down to 50p, and she looked so disappointed. But in the end, I gave her £2 for these photos, and she couldn't understand that. Why would I haggle it down and then give her more than she asked for in the first place? But I think that's part of the joy of haggling. But we did actually go to this nunnery, if that's again the correct term, and these nuns did in fact sing to us, and they all seemed quite happy, and they got a good education there. But they all have to shave their heads. Some of them were very pretty, even with shaven heads. So, but of course, the main thing for going is that they actually do learn to read and write, and I think that they have quite a good life. And indeed, they're still very young at heart. So when we left, a load of them went into the river, probably to have a wash their clothes, and do all that. And of course, there's all manner of life goes on along the rivers, as you can see. This guy's washing his smalls here. But we got the boat back, and we're slowly making our way back to the hotel as the sun started to go down. And indeed, this is my last sunset photo of that day. So I think here's a good time to break as we go into what will be the next day, which is the 7th of April. So we can take a break here. That's just over the hour. I was hoping for an hour, but I got talking too much, as usual.
That's
over to you, Graham.
Yep, that's all right, Ray. Thanks very much. Well, it's very enjoyable up to present, so looking forward to the second half. So if we could break now, and if you could be back for 20 past, please. 20 past. That'll get me enough time, and I'll put part 2 up for you to join then. So thanks everyone for now, and I'll see you in about 15 minutes. Thanks very much.
Graham?